Attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome everyone to the PaintCare webinar for Colorado. Quick orientation for using the GoToWebinar system. By default, all attendees are in mute to control background noise. However, we do greatly encourage questions. In terms of using the GoToWebinar panel, you can see that there's in the top left corner, you've got a viewer. So if the screen size does not look appropriate to you, you can change it by looking at the zoom and determine how big you want that window to be. You can capture a screenshot by clicking the camera icon in the top right corner of your panel. And I should point out that features may be slightly different on a Mac versus a PC. If your panel has seemed to have disappeared and you just have the little flyout bar here, click the orange box with the white arrow and that will pull your panel back out for you to use it. I had mentioned questions. The best time to submit a question is right when it comes to mind because you might forget it as we move on. And we'll be keeping time to answer questions towards the end of the webinar. So you can use your question box. As a question comes to mind, submit the question. And at the end of the webinar, Marjane will be going through and answering each of those for you. If your whole window seems to have disappeared, it's probably just behind another window. So you can go down into your taskbar and look for the GoToWebinar icon. For example, it would be here for me. And that will just click that and that will pull it right back up to the front with you. So with that, I will be switching over to Marjane. And again, thank you for attending.
Hi folks, just 1 second, let me get my presentation up. There we go. Hello, good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you are. I guess this is a Colorado webinar, so it'll be good morning. It's 10 a.m. there. My name is Marjane Zaraparvar, and I'm the Director of PaintCare. I'm helping out today. Kathy Laurie is the Program Manager for the state of Colorado, so I have both of our contact information on the screen right now. You're certainly welcome to contact either of us if you have any questions about today's webinar or anything related to the Colorado program, but Kathy will probably be the better person since she's on the ground in Colorado getting ready to get that program off the ground. So for those of you that may have joined us on Tuesday, in case I didn't cover it on Tuesday, this will be the same information that we did cover on Tuesday, so you're certainly welcome to listen in again, but this will be the identical presentation as the Tuesday webinar. This will be the last of our retail webinars. We held a few of them back in January and then 2 this week. And really the goal of these webinars is to help retailers be prepared for the program that begins in Colorado on Wednesday. So we want to make sure we cover all the different elements of the program that impact you, both if you're selling paint and if you choose to be a PaintCare drop-off site. So it's a little bit different, but that's the goal of today. Bob already covered how to submit questions, so please try to do those as we go along so that you don't forget about them, but certainly you're welcome to submit as many as you want at the end. My goal is to get through the presentation in about 30 to 35 minutes, so that should leave us another 20 minutes or so at the end for questions. But of course, you're welcome again to contact us anytime after the webinar if you think of additional things. So with that, let me provide an overview of what the presentation will cover. So I'm going to talk about who PaintCare is and how the PaintCare program came about. Go a little bit into the specifics of what the PaintCare or the Paint Stewardship Law requires. Certainly cover what products fall under the program. It's not all paints, but it's architectural coatings. And then a little bit about the responsibility and the role of paint retailers, which includes making sure that the fee that will be added to the price of paint come July 1 is passed through to consumers, making sure that retailers are only selling registered brands, registered products. It's optional to provide consumer information about the program, but we certainly encourage all retailers, and we've recently done a mailing to provide consumer materials to all retailers, so we certainly encourage you to provide information to your customers. And then also it's voluntary to be a paint drop-off site, but we hope if you haven't already signed up that today's webinar will encourage you to do so. So PaintCare. PaintCare is a 501c3 organization. We were designed specifically, or were set up specifically to design and implement all aspects of paint stewardship programs on behalf of paint manufacturers. So we're actually created by the American Coatings Association, which is the primary trade association for the paint industry. They set up the PaintCare program and the PaintCare organization in 2009 when the first paint stewardship law passed in the state of Oregon. We are governed by a board of architectural paint manufacturers, just like the American Coatings Association is. And we're an independent organization, but we operate under the umbrella of the ACA, or the American Coatings Association. That's good because in addition to being governed by a board of architectural paint manufacturers, many paint manufacturers are also retailers that have a very close connection to retailers. So we're able to get the perspective of retailers as well through the representation that we have on our board. Let's talk a little bit about why this program is even necessary. How did this all come about? And the history of how this program came about really involves the household hazardous waste community, local governments, state governments that have historically been tasked with managing, all end-of-life products, all waste, garbage, trash, products that become obsolete or that we no longer want. There isn't really a history of retailers or manufacturers taking products back. It's always been something that the governments provide. Paint happens to be one of those products, and it's one that has turned out to be quite costly for local governments to manage because of the large volume that's out there in the community. So approximately, we've done some studies over the years, and other organizations have done studies, including the EPA, and what that's demonstrated is about 10% of paint that's purchased is left over. So whether it was by accident, by over purchasing, or we buy a little bit extra because we plan to do some touch-ups and then you never end up doing those touch-ups, whatever the reason, about 10% of the paint that we purchase is left over, and that adds up to about 65 million gallons of paint a year. So it's a lot of paint. It's not an insignificant amount. It's a lot of paint for local governments to have to manage through their programs. In Colorado specifically, about 1.2 million gallons a year. That's the contribution in Colorado to the problem. Like many other states, Colorado unfortunately has very limited options for the public to recycle your leftover paint. They have some household hazardous waste collection facilities and some events, but even the city of Denver doesn't have an event or even a permanent facility. And that's true across the country. There's many states that have very few options, again, because these are costly programs to run. And so with Colorado, that's also the case. It's also the case that even in places where they have household hazardous waste programs, many of them don't take commercial paint and or don't take commercial waste. And a lot of leftover paint comes from painting contractors and businesses. And so there's oftentimes no easy or inexpensive way to manage that little bit of leftover paint. Usually businesses have to call a hazardous waste hauler, which can be quite expensive. It's also the case that not all programs take latex paint. Latex paint is not a hazardous product, but it's generally managed through household hazardous waste programs. But it's not a hazardous product, so you can technically dry it up and dispose of it. Of course, that's a messy process. It's labor intensive. It's not necessarily something you want to do if you have children or pets, leaving a couple cans out to dry or having to mix kitty litter or something into it. It can be messy and time consuming, and so a lot of folks don't really like to do that. But because it's not hazardous, a lot of household hazardous waste programs don't actually take latex paint, when in fact latex paint is probably 70 to 80% of the paint that we see left over. And so again, I mentioned that local and state governments, they have limited resources, and the fact is that about 50% of the household hazardous waste that comes through these programs is paint. And so that's really the reason why paint stood out as a product that local and state governments wanted the industry, the paint manufacturing industry, to take some responsibility for and help to manage at the end of life. And that's what we call industry stewardship, or extended producer responsibility, product stewardship. There's lots of different terms for it, but in a nutshell, they all mean the person that manufactured that product, the person that produced it, should really take some role in helping to manage that product when it's no longer wanted, when it comes to its end of life. And so in 2003, an organization called the Product Stewardship Institute began a dialogue with those local and state governments that I mentioned, and recyclers and the federal EPA, and other entities that had an interest in post-consumer paint management, and invited the paint industry, paint manufacturers to the table. And the American Coatings Association, as well as individual paint manufacturers, participated in that dialogue. And really the goal from the perspective of the local and state governments was for paint industry to get involved. And so it took some time. It took some time for everyone to come up with a model that It was probably not perfect for everyone. There was some compromise from the industry side, there was some compromise from the government side, but in the end, after several years of discussions and many studies on how much paint is left over and what the recycling options are and what the costs will be, the group did come together and develop what we call the model state-level paint stewardship law. So that law is supported by the American Coatings Association. It's supported by a number of state and local governments that signed basically an MOU agreeing to it. And that became the platform for the PaintCare program. I mentioned earlier Oregon was the first state that passed that law in 2009. So it took a couple years after there was agreement on the legislation for a state to actually pass it. And I'll show a slide here in a second that shows all the other states that have the law. But a couple slides first on what specifically the law requires. So in a nutshell, it requires the paint industry to set up a paint management program in any state that passes the law. And what that means is a few different things. It means that in addition to setting up a take-back program for the leftover paint, the first goal is really to try to reduce how much paint is left over. And so we do that, the PaintCare program, we do that primarily through education. And we do that with two different messages. We call it our reduction message and the buy right message and the use it up message. And that's reduction comes through buy right and reuse comes through use it up. So oftentimes you hear reduce, reuse, recycle. So we're talking about those first two on that list. And so we do that through education. For buying right or buying the right amount, we generally encourage the public to ask a professional for help. So rather than using a simple calculator or guessing on your own how much paint you need, we really direct the public to ask a professional in a paint store for help on that. The element of using it up, so let's say you do your best to buy the right amount, you still have a little bit of leftover, then with that we try to we provide suggestions and ideas for how to use up that small amount that might be left over. But ultimately, there's still going to be leftover paint, and that's when the next section of the program comes into place, and that's setting up a convenient system for the collection and recycling of the paint. And so I mentioned earlier in Colorado, there are some household hazardous waste facilities, there are some events, but those facilities oftentimes are only open, if you're lucky, a few times a week, but with limited days and hours, and they're usually not conveniently located. They're usually somewhere on the outskirts of town, because after all, who wants a hazardous waste facility in a central business area? That's not where you find them. And so the benefit of the PaintCare program, the convenience that we provide, is by working with paint retailers. And paint retailers tend to be centrally located. They tend to be open 5, 6, 7 days a week. And so we can provide a significantly more convenience through the partners that we have in the program. And I'll get into a little bit more of what that looks like in Colorado later on. And ultimately, all of this is, at least from the perspective of local governments, in order to reduce their costs, but also just to provide better options for the public. A few more things about what the PaintCare law does. It does require participation by all manufacturers, so that means anybody that's selling paint into the state of Colorado, beginning next week on Wednesday, has to be registered with the program. So they need to be signed up with PaintCare or running their own program. So far, with the other 5 programs that we've set up, we have yet to have a state or a manufacturer choose to set up their own program, but usually that's an option. They can either set up their own program or participate through PaintCare. But again, everyone does it through PaintCare. And the consequence of not registering with PaintCare and essentially not adding the fee to your product price is that beginning next week, July 1, you cannot sell your paint into Colorado. Fortunately, we've never really had to cross this bridge for the most part. We've had 1 or 2 incidents over hundreds of manufacturers, but we've had more or less 100% participation, and the point of that is to create a level playing field. If all manufacturers have to participate, that provides a level playing field. The law also allows us to create a sustainable financing mechanism. It does that by allowing us to, but basically, when the program begins, all paint manufacturers will raise the price of paint by the same amount. I'll cover the cost structure, the cost model for Colorado a little bit later, but on the first day of the program, everyone, manufacturers, retailers, everyone will raise their price by the same amount, again, to ensure a level playing field. But in order to do that, there needs to be some antitrust protection, and the law does provide for that. The program has the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment oversees the program, and so that's another element of the law. even though we design the program, we implement it, we manage the funding, pay all the bills, basically operate it completely independent of the state, there is a role for them to oversee us. They do that by, we're required to submit a program plan and then every year an annual report. And in the program plan, we basically lay out all the details of what the program is going to look like. And if you'd like to delve a little bit deeper, you can go onto our website and read that program plan. So it's their responsibility to ensure that we are complying with what we said we're going to do in the program plan, and then annually through the annual reports, keeping a check on that. So we work very closely with the state agency, but again, this is very different than previous waste management programs where a local government or a state agency have some role in running the program. In this case, it's entirely the industry doing it. Here's a slide that shows what states have paint stewardship laws. So the first five are, actually the first six, I should say, are up and running: Oregon, California, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Minnesota, and Vermont. Colorado's program, again, begins on Wednesday of next week. Maine will begin on August 1, and then the last program, or the last state that has, or in this case a district that has a paint stewardship law but doesn't have a program operating yet, is Washington, D.C., and we'll begin that program most likely in January of next year. So a little bit about the collection system. I mentioned earlier that primary component of the program is to create a convenient take-back system, and so we do that primarily by working with paint retailers, whether it's paint, hardware, home improvement, or reuse stores. They're a really large component of our program. We've recruited about 150 retailers to participate in the Colorado program. We'll probably have 120 to 130 of them ready to go by next week on July 1. So right now we don't post any information about those retailers because we don't want them to start receiving paint ahead of the launch. But come on Wednesday, if you go onto our website, and I'll show you this after I finish the presentation, if you go onto our website, we have something called the site locator tool. At that point, you can type in your zip code and find all the retailers in your area that are drop-off sites, as well as household hazardous waste programs or any other kind of PaintCare drop-off sites. So 150 or so retailers will be participating in the program. We also partner with those household hazardous waste programs that I mentioned earlier. There is about, I think, a dozen in Colorado, and so we want to have a partnership with them because they provide a different value. Well, first of all, the public is, many people are used to using them, and so we don't want to take that service away. But the other benefit that they provide that the retailers maybe don't is if you have a variety of things that you want to dispose of, or if you're moving and you've got some Windex and some bleach and some pesticides, maybe some fluorescent lights, as well as paint, the household hazardous waste facility can take all of those things for you at the same time. And so they're an important partner for us, but a much smaller partner in terms of the number of locations that will be in the program. So in addition to those two, sometimes we try to fill in the gaps. If we have an area of the state where there are no retailers and there is no government program, then we try to find, whether it's waste transfer stations or recycling centers or landfills, anywhere that that makes sense for the public to go and recycle paint, and that has staff that can man the program, we're happy to partner with. We may also do some paint collection events. Again, if we identify some areas of the state where we can't find a permanent location, then we'll do a one-day event. So it'll be something about a month before the event. We will send out notices and put newspaper ads to promote that event to the public. And it'll be just a one-day type of a thing. And it's something we reevaluate every year to say, well, how did it go last year? Do we need to continue to do it? But we'll probably do a few of those in Colorado as well. And then the final service that we provide is a direct pickup service. And this is primarily for the benefit of painting contractors and any other businesses that have accumulated a large volume of paint. So if a business has accumulated a large volume of paint, generally we set the cutoff or the minimum at being able to fill about three cubic yard boxes. So it's about 300 gallons in terms of the container size. We don't want them to overwhelm the retail store, so instead we'll just go directly to that site, provide the boxes, fill the boxes, and take it away. And there's no cost for that. It's all covered in the cost of the program. You can see a picture there in the bottom right of the screen. That's a good picture of a painting contractor that had been accumulating paint for a long time and was very happy to be able to call PaintCare and have it all cleaned up in one day. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the funding mechanism, the sustainable funding mechanism. We call it a PaintCare fee. The legislation, I believe, calls it an assessment or a recovery fee, but just to keep it simple, we call it the PaintCare fee. So on your screen, you'll see what those fees are. In Colorado, and actually in all of our states so far, we've managed to keep the fee structure the same. That may not always be the case because we really just set the fees to be able to cover the cost of the program. So we may have to increase those fees or decrease them if we're building a large surplus in the future in individual states. But for now, with this whole PaintCare program still being relatively new, we've managed to be able to keep the fee structure similar. And that's because generally paint management and waste management, the cost isn't too different across the country. So for half a pint and larger containers, so anything between half a pint and a 1 gallon is 35 cents. 1 gallon container is 75 cents, and then anything from a 1 gallon container up to 5 gallons is $1.60. We don't take back products that are in in larger than 5 gallons, and we don't put a fee on products that are sold in larger than 5 gallons. So it's really meant to be the typical consumer products that are sold to retail. We don't deal with any bulk volume. I mentioned earlier the fee will be added by manufacturers when the program begins. So after July 1, as a retailer, any invoice you get from a supplier, from a manufacturer, you'll see that the fee should be added on to the product price. And then as a retailer, you're responsible for keeping that fee on the product and passing it down to the consumer. So it is ultimately a consumer-funded program. The shift is that now this program is funded, or paint management is funded by consumers of paint, whereas historically it would be paid either through your garbage rates or through taxes. And so even if you never buy paint, you still have to pay for managing it. Now it's really just funded by consumers of paint. The funding is then collected by PaintCare, and I'm going to show in the next slide we'll show how the fees flow. But the funding is basically sent from manufacturers to PaintCare, and then we use those fees to pay for all elements of the program, including the collection and transportation processing of paint, our outreach and education, the staffing that we have both in-state and sort of corporate level, and all elements of managing the program. So here you can see that visually. If you start in the top left corner with the orange box, oh, I forgot to fix it. It should say Colorado at the top there, not Maine. But starting in the top left corner, you see that the fees are added by the paint manufacturers to the wholesale price of paint. They go down to paint retailers and distributors and then passed on to the consumer. And then meanwhile, paint manufacturers collect those fees, and monthly they report to PaintCare how much paint they sold and submit the fees that go along with that. We then take that money and use it to pay for all program elements. We also, you'll see in the far right side, we also do pay the state agency some amount for overseeing the program, and it's basically their cost for overseeing the program, so their staff time. Here's a slide on program products. This is kind of a condensed version of it. We have a more extensive list with more detail on pretty much all of our outreach materials. So if you're a retail store, hopefully you've received several mailers from us, and on most of those materials there's a list of program products, but you can also go to our website at any time and take a look at what that list is, the longer version of the list. But in summary, we take latex paint, oil-based paint, sealers, stains, lacquers, and varnishes. And then there's a few non-program products that are important to highlight because while they may or may not be paint, they're not a part of the PaintCare program. And so that includes aerosol paints, thinners and solvents, caulking compounds, some specialty coatings, original equipment manufacturing paints, and industrial paints. And if you have any questions about those, you're welcome to, again, try to ask it today through the chat box or give us a call afterwards and we can talk about it. Sometimes it gets a little confusing on some of the program products. It's important to highlight that the list of products that have the fee on them is the exact same list of products that are collected by drop-off sites. And so if there's a fee on a product, that's what we take back. If you take back something, that's the product that would have the fee on it. But I should clarify that we are taking all of the old paint as well. So you will be receiving paint that never had a fee on it because it's old. Anything prior to July 1, we will take, whether it's 5, 10, 30 years old, we're going to take it through the program. But just wanted to highlight that the list of what's taken back and what has a fee on it are the same. So now let's get into a little more detail. I think I've probably covered most of this already, but a little more detail about the role of the retailers. I mentioned earlier the fee pass-through, so we've already covered what that means. It's also the responsibility of retailers to make sure that they're only selling registered products. So even though this is a manufacturer responsibility program, and they're the ones that face the consequence of not being registered with the program, as a retailer, you're not allowed to sell a product that's not registered with PaintCare. And so I will show you in a second or a little bit later how to access that information. It's on our website. I have a slide on it, and then I'll actually go to the website and show you where you can pull that list. And so it's important, if you haven't already, to take a look at the PaintCare list and compare it to what you have on your shelves to make sure everything you have on your shelf is on that list. And so you want to identify anything that you see that fits into the description of program products or is an architectural coating, and make sure that brand is registered. Again, number 3 and 4 are actually both voluntary. Providing information to the public is voluntary, being a drop-off site. Oh, I have a colleague sitting next to me who's reminding me that actually in Colorado, giving information to the public is not voluntary. Sometimes I get those mixed up because in some states it is and in some states it isn't. Thanks, Paul. So it's not voluntary, and we've done, we've done our best to provide that information to retailers. We'll cover a little bit later about how to order additional information. But we have lots of consumer materials, posters, fact sheets, brochures that are made available for paint retailers in Colorado to distribute to their customers. A couple of FAQs that we have come across over the years. So the first one is, how do you know what products to put the fees on? So I basically already covered that. You want to both keep an eye on your supplier invoices, but you also want to take a look at the definition of program products and architectural coatings, and make sure that anything you have in your store that fits that description has the fee on it. If for some reason if you identify something as a PaintCare product, either because of the definition of architectural coatings or because you actually see that on the PaintCare list, but the fee is not included, please let us know and we'll have a talk with the manufacturer. Chances are that it was done. It's an accident. We really haven't had any problems with that. So it may also be the case that you're selling a product that for some reason hasn't been registered with the program yet. Again, let us know. Sometimes manufacturers create new product lines and things might just kind of slip through the cracks. But again, it hasn't really been a problem. Just let us know. We'll take care of it for you. Are you required to show the fee on the customer receipt? You are not. This is something that's optional. We highly encourage it because it helps explain to the public why the price of paint has gone up. It provides a level of transparency. It's great for education. Oftentimes the consumer will see the fee and then question what it's about, and that's your opportunity to tell them about the new program. So again, not required, but we really do encourage it. Is the fee taxable? The fee is taxable, and the reason for that is really the fee is actually just a part of the product price. Since it's embedded into the product price when you're purchasing that product from your supplier, you would tax it just like you would tax the rest of the product. Yes, we do encourage you to show it as a separate line item, but just because you show it separately as a fee, but the fact that we show it separately as a fee doesn't remove it from being a part of the product price. And then the final question we often get is whether the fee is a deposit, and it's not. There are programs like this. I'm not sure if there are any in Colorado where there's a deposit program. You can return something and get some deposit back. That's not the case with the PaintCare program. All the funds are collected and used to fund the program. Nothing goes back to the public. Oh, my slides are stuck. There we go. A couple more FAQs. Does the fee apply to existing inventory? So this is a question we often get, and the answer is yes, it does. And so even though all retailers beginning next Wednesday are going to have some inventory of program products of architectural coatings in their store, but they didn't pay the fee on because they received it prior to July 1, we still require that the fee get added to that. And that's just so that, next time you get a supply, you don't have some cans of the same product with a fee on it and some without it. So for the products that the fee was not included when you purchased it from the supplier, the retail stores are just going to keep that fee. They're not going to collect it and submit it to a manufacturer because it doesn't work that way. You're paying a fee in advance, and then you're recouping the cost when you sell the product. And so, again, on July 1, put the fee on everything that you have in inventory, and then you just collect that fee like you would when you have any other sale. But after that, anything you purchase after July 1 will have the fee embedded into it, so you're paying for it directly when you're buying the paint from the supplier. Another question we get often is whether the fees are based on container size or on content, and the fees are based on the container size. So we know that a 1 gallon can of paint may not have a full gallon of liquid paint in it. That's not what we're counting. We're counting the actual container size. Also, is the fee per container, or is it on a total purchase? And the answer is that it's, again, per container. So for example, if let's say you've run out of 5 gallon containers, or for whatever reason a customer wants to buy 5 1-gallon cans of the same product, you still have to charge them 75 cents for every can. You can't say, oh, this is the equivalent to 5 gallons, therefore I'll charge you the 5-gallon rate. Here's information about registered brands, how to know that you're only selling registered brands. You can go to our website under paintcare.org, go to the Colorado tab, and then under the Colorado tab there's a retail section. In that retail section you should be able to find a list of registered brands and registered manufacturers. It's more important that you check the registered brands list. This image I have on the screen right now says January 1, but the list is actually updated about every couple weeks, if not more frequently, especially now as we're coming up to launching the program. So there'll be a much newer version on our website, which I can show you a little bit later. A little more information about providing consumer information. So again, if you're a retailer, hopefully you've received at least 3 rounds of mailers from us. In January, we did send out a packet of fact sheets that were for painting contractors, for professional painters, because it was very important to get that information out early to painting contractors, since they often bid projects well in advance. So hopefully you got those and you were able to distribute them to your customers. And then this week you should have received a packet of general consumer brochures, which again, you can order more of anything that we have at any time. Also included in the mailer that you would receive this week or last week is a reorder form, which is the image on the screen. But really, you can request additional materials any way you want. You can use this form. You can go on our website, pull down this form, fill it out, and fax it to us, email it to us. You can just shoot us an email, either to Kathy or to our general inbox, saying you'd like more of whichever material you need more of. You can pick up the phone and call us. Our goal is really to get you anything that you need. We also translate all of our materials into Spanish. We translate them into other languages as well in other states, but we haven't received a request for any other languages in Colorado. But if we do receive that, we're happy to translate those materials into other languages. So now just a few slides here. Going a little longer than I had planned, but just a few slides on the specifics of being a paint drop-off site. I'm assuming at this point, if you're on the call, if you are a drop-off site already, then you should have had a training from us, or you're in the queue for having a training very soon. If you're still unsure, you certainly can join the program at any point. You don't have to start on July 1 as a drop-off site. Sometimes retailers wait and see how it goes for other stores, or just want to see the program launch before they make the commitment of being a drop-off site. So you are welcome to contact us at any point in the future if you want to be a drop-off site if you're not already. So I'm going to go through these slides kind of quickly because we'll cover these in a lot more detail if you choose to be a drop-off site. So some of the things that PaintCare provides to drop-off sites is we come and do an in-store staff training, and we provide ongoing support. So as a drop-off site, we're going to be visiting you on a regular basis to make sure everything is running smoothly for you, that our transporter is picking up paint in a timely manner, that the boxes are working well for you, that everything is going smoothly. We will also, after the training, leave behind a binder, an operations binder with training slides, and you can use that to train any staff that either weren't present at the training or that might join your organization in the future. And so it's important for us that anybody that's touching paint for the PaintCare program has gone through the training, and so we leave a self-training binder behind. We will provide the paint storage bins and the labels that go with it, as well as the spill kit. And every store is going to be different in terms of the number of boxes they can hold. Our preference is that you can hold at least 2, but if you can hold 3 or 4, the more boxes a retail store can hold, the better it is for the program. We will, of course, arrange for paint transportation and recycling. We'll provide the consumer outreach materials. We've already covered that a little bit. store posters indicating that you are a drop-off site. We also have store posters and consumer education materials for stores that are not drop-off sites, excuse me, with general information about the program, but there's additional materials that are made available when you are a drop-off site. And then really the thing that we provide in exchange for for helping us by being a drop-off site is promoting your store. And so we do that through a number of ways. We list you on our website, and once a program has been up and running for a few months and the retail stores are comfortable having additional promotion, we'll reach out to you and start to ask, what newspapers do you think we should actually run the name of your store in? What radio stations might work well for the region that you're in? And at that point, we'll start running ads like the one you see on the screen. That these tend to be regional, so we use local papers and just list the stores that are in that area. Of course, you're welcome to do as much self-promotion as well, but we try to be very careful in the first few months of the program so the retail stores don't get overwhelmed, and we really limit the amount of direct outreach that we do. Here's some examples of the consumer materials. Again, both of these, if you're a retail store, you should have received samples of, or not samples of, packets of both the general brochure and the contractor fact sheet. Likewise, you should have received the poster on the left. All retailers should have received a few of those posters, just a general informational poster. And then if you're a drop-off site, there's different variations of the poster on the right side of your screen. So in terms of how much paint you would accept as a drop-off site, we really leave that up to the retail store to make that determination. All of our public outreach materials say 5 gallons per customer per visit, so that's the minimum of what we expect you to take. You can certainly take more, but we do try to manage that by listing, in our outreach materials, it says if you have more than 5 gallons, call the store in advance. But on our website, we will put the specific volume that you would like for your store. So whether it's 5 gallons, 10 gallons, 15 gallons, we'll list those details under your information on our website. And then if a customer calls or comes in with more paint, it's up to you how much you want to take. You can take 5, 10, 100 gallons if it's a good customer and you want to provide that service for them. In terms of the paint can condition as a drop-off site, we do ask that you only take paint in the original container that has a label that you can read, and that's just a safety measure. I mean, we know that at the end of the day, you don't actually know what's in that can. Hopefully it's paint. It almost always is, but there's going to be times when it's not. But we try to put whatever measures we can in place to run the safest program possible for you and for us. And so part of that is asking the retail stores to only accept paint in the original container with a label on it that's not leaking, so that you don't make a mess in your store. Again, 5 gallons or less. We don't take empty paint cans. That's simply because we're paying a hazardous waste hauler to manage these materials. Empty paint cans hopefully can be recycled locally in the community and not have to be brought down to a drop-off store. But we also don't want the retailer to have to police the program. So if you end up in a situation where somebody's coming in with an empty paint can along with some paint cans, it's okay if you take it, but generally we promote that we don't take it. And we also ask that you never open up any containers. You don't need to worry about what's inside it. Never open up the containers. I'm going to probably go through this slide kind of quickly. Some of this will be intuitive in terms of where you would keep the paint bin. What I want to highlight is that it's not a it's not a self-serve program. Every can of paint needs to be taken by somebody in the store and taken and put into the box. The public should never have access to the box or be placing paint into the box. And so boxes are usually in the back room, and if they're not, they're just somewhere where the public can't access them or can't put paint into it themselves. We prefer indoor storage, primarily because of climate issues, but outdoor storage is allowed as well. If it is outdoor, it has to be an area that's gated, again, that the public can't get to, and that has some kind of a cover. So these are the kinds of details we'll discuss when a site expresses interest. But if you are a store that only has outdoor storage, that doesn't mean you can't participate in the program. Give us the call and we'll work through the specifics of your area. We're often asked what happens to the paint. Our first goal is to try to not have to manage it downstream. And so we do that by supporting reuse programs. And so whether it's sometimes Habitat for Humanity and other types of restores, we'll actually take good quality paint and put it back out on the shelf and let the public take it either for free or for a charge. household hazardous waste programs do that as well. So we do support those programs. It's not something a retailer is likely going to want to do, give away free paint when you actually sell paint. So we don't expect retailers to do it, but any other type of organization where that makes sense, we support that. But when the paint is brought back into the program, if we're not able to give it back out as is, then it's generally latex paint is recycled back into latex paint. About half of the paint is in a good enough quality to be able to do that. So it's turned back into recycled content paint and either sold domestically or exported. For the paint that's not in a good enough quality to be turned back into paint that's spoiled or has some other problem with it, we try to do something else with it. So whether it's used as a road-based product or there are some alternative options available throughout the country, that'll be our goal. Unfortunately, there are no sort of secondary recycling options in Colorado, so we may have to move those materials out of state in order to do that. And oil-based paint is generally used as a fuel for cement kilns and for hazardous waste incinerators. So just one more slide here on a couple more FAQs that we often get as a drop-off site. The first is, do stores only accept brands sold in their store? No, actually, as a drop-off site, you're going to accept all paint from all manufacturers, not just what you sell in your store. And that also includes, brands or companies that are no longer in business. So you might get some things that are obsolete or no longer being manufactured, but we ask that you take all paint back. Can a store turn a contractor away? We put this question up because a lot of times these types of take-back programs are only meant for residents, not for businesses. But in fact, the PaintCare program, since all paint consumers pay the fee, all paint consumers, including contractors, universities, large businesses, institutions, everybody can take advantage of the paint. Again, you're going to limit how much paint you can take, and you don't have to take more than 5 gallons per customer, but you shouldn't turn any customer away because of the type of customer or the type of business that they are. The program is open to everyone. Can you charge a fee for consumers to drop off their program products at your store? The answer is no. As a drop-off site, you're volunteering to be in the program, and you're providing the man hours and the space in your store. And in exchange, we're going to do the promotion of your store, but you can now charge a fee for the service. And then the final question is, and this is something we've had a change in policy recently, which is, can any of the waste from the store be placed into the PaintCare bins? And of course, you can place any return products because that is post-consumer. We also allow mist tints to be placed into the boxes. I know that all paint stores are going to prefer to try to sell the paint before they put it into it, but if ultimately you're left with some mist tint that you can't manage, that's now your store waste. So we allow that to go into the program. There are some paints that we don't allow, obsolete products, and that's generally because there should be a system in place to return those obsolete products to the manufacturers. But if you have any questions about this, feel free to give us a call and we can discuss it more outside of this webinar. So that is the presentation. I'm going to leave the screen here with contact information up for a minute or so while I see if any questions come in. I also want to take a second to show you our website. So I think we've got a few questions that have come in. Let me take a look at these questions and I'll show you our website first.
Would you like me to read questions, Marjorie?
So the first question, I've got them. I just wanted to make sure I understood it before I tried to answer it. So the first question is, what about recycled latex paint? So basically paint that comes into the PaintCare program and then is sent downstream to a latex recycler who then turns it back into recycled content paint and sells it essentially as paint. Does the PaintCare fee have to apply? And the answer is yes. That once it's remanufactured in the paint, that is a new paint sale, and so as long as it's being sold back into Colorado, whether it was remanufactured in Colorado or out of state, if it's being sold in Colorado, the fee does apply to it. And there are a number of paint recyclers, latex paint recyclers in Colorado, and they should be registered with our program. If they're not, they will be by Wednesday of next week. And then the second question, which probably came in before I got to the slide, is what happens with the paint after it's collected, and I did cover that. So I'm just going to hang on here and see if more questions come in, And meanwhile, I'm going to show you guys our website. PaintCare.org, this is the front page of our website. To get anything related to Colorado, you go up here and you click under PaintCare States, and then you can either click the Colorado State icon down here or click CO there. And so now you've gotten into the PaintCare Colorado information. I mentioned that there will be a retailer tab, so you want to click here for retailer information. And here, the first information is about the webinars we have right now, so that will probably be taken down. We'll leave the slides up, but the information about signing up obviously will be taken down. A lot of the text on here just covers the information I've already covered in the webinar about the responsibility of retailers. Down here, under Sell Registered Brands, you can see the list of registered brands. I'm going to click on that, and we can take a look at that. And you'll see that this was updated on June 11th, so I'm sure it'll get updated again before the program launches if we've added more products. So you want to make sure to take a look at that if you're a paint retailer. Also on this page are fact sheets about the program for the retailers. So most of the stuff hopefully you've received through the mail from us already. And then below that is all the information, all the publications for your customers. So whether it's a brochure, some fact sheets for contractors, or some other materials. If you're not familiar with them, please do take a minute to look through this and let us know if you want to receive any of it. And then the final section under retailers is partnering with PaintCare. So again, if you're not already registered to be, or you haven't already submitted an interest form to us, or you haven't already been trained to be a retail store and you want to do that, everything you need to know about that process is down here at the bottom of the page. The other thing I wanted to show was how you can identify a PaintCare drop-off site. And there's a number of different ways to get there, but from our front page, you would go to find the drop-off site near you, either here or at the top of the page. And you'll see that we have a search tool. So you can go in here. I'm going to type in a California zip code since the Colorado information isn't already there. Type in a zip code, and then you can see I typed in a zip code in the Bay Area in California, so you can see the drop-off locations that are available in this area. And again, you would click on the retail, or somebody wanting to use a program would click on the retail store to get the address, and when they click on the retail store to get the address, they would also get information about the volume and any other special notes that we might want to put up. So we'll work with you to make sure any additional information that needs to be posted will be included in the note under your site. Check here to see if we have any more questions. Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions come in, but I'll just hang on for another minute, and I'll put the slide back up with our contact information. Of course, we've been doing these for a while, so we do try to cover all the FAQs in the presentation, so it doesn't surprise me that we don't get a lot of questions. Okay, well, I'm not seeing any more questions coming in, so I think we can go ahead and wrap up a little bit early here. I want to thank everyone, all the attendees that participated, and again, feel free to follow up with us if you have any more questions for the program that begins next week, and we look forward to having a successful launch of the Colorado program. So thanks again. Thank you, Bob, for helping out. Bye-bye.